Hello, boys and girls, girls and ghouls, all the rest of it, horror fans. Happy October 2020. So this is take 2 of this video, and what's funny is I'm actually recording this in the middle of September, so bizarrely this is a couple of weeks before you'll see this, but I'm obviously getting some episodes in the bank ahead of what's going to be a massive month for me on the channel, a massive month when it comes to horror viewing, horror reviews. So I promise you, good folks, as many horror movie reviews as I can possibly do for October. That's why I'm getting a jump start. But so this is gonna be the first one, or at least that's the plan, and it is JuOn the Curse from 2000, so 20 years old now, this movie. And this was the very first in the massive Grudge franchise. There's so many movies in that franchise you wouldn't even realise. That's just like the Japanese original before you even get to the American remakes and the various other ones. But so this is the first of the Japanese original. JuOn the Curse, as I said, it connects to the Grudge franchise, and at the start of the movie it's explained on the screen. You get like these like lettering that runs down the history of the curse. It says then it is based on a grudge, and then anyone who comes in contact with someone who's been cursed, they also get cursed, and they obviously turn into ghosts and various things. So it's laying out the history. Does quite a nice job, actually. It's a very low budget film, and the structure of it is quite interesting because what they do is they sort of like break it into almost an anthology type thing with like a few different stories, but the difference is then the stories actually do connect. So you get this setup at the beginning, and then you have a few different parts, and then you get like a wraparound at the end. So the opening part of the film follows this school teacher and him and his pregnant wife, and he's worried about he's worried about one of his students who hasn't showed up to school for ages. So his wife suggests, "Hey, you've got the address right. Why don't you do that?" And although that's quite a logical idea in the real world, in a horror movie, that maybe rings alarm bells. Hey, you maybe shouldn't do that. You shouldn't go to the unknown person's house. But obviously he takes their advice. He goes, and he finds the boy there just on his own. And the boy says the parents have left him. They've both gone out, and we see that the boys live in squalor, really, a really, mucky, very filthy apartment, very run down. And we sort of leave it there with the teacher just looking around the apartment, and then we move on to the other stories, and then what happens is we return to that story at the end for the wraparound. So that and another part, the final part of the story is set in the present day with like this estate agent who's trying to sell the house of the original incident that has been cursed, basically. So we get like an end part to that. But we see these other characters who are all like somehow connected to the curse or somehow connected to the original story. But as I said, the setup is with the teacher going to visit the boy in the house. And overall, I'd say it's not a bad little film. It's quite solid. I don't think it's anything amazing. I think maybe the budget tells at time. Obviously, a lot of good horror comes from like low budget filmmaking, but I think maybe at times the budget works a bit against this. There's not that much of an atmosphere to it at times, and I think just certain bits of it look a bit too amateurish. I think there's some okay practical effects, but there's moments where you thought, well, maybe if they had a bit more to the effects or to the budget, then the effects could have been improved. So there's a scene, for example, where a girl appears to like her mother, and it's like the ghost version of the girl, and she's got like a jaw missing. And I thought that sort of effect looked a little bit too phony. But there are moments where I think the effect looks okay. I think in some ways it's quite a simple film in the direction and stuff, the atmosphere. It's nothing too flashy. And that probably works okay. I think a lot of the direction is to do with following characters around, drifting around their house or whatever the setting is. And there are some decent jump scares. And the plot, I think, is solid enough. They do some interesting stuff with it. I think solid is the word. Overall, it's solid but not amazing. And I think this has. I think I want to do more of this franchise. I would like to compare the movies in it and certainly compare it to the later ones. Thank God I've already done the most recent Grudge movie, the 2020 reboot, if you like, because that was absolutely awful. You can find my review of that on the channel, and I'll just say if any of these Grudge movies are worse than that one, I'll be very, very surprised, because that was dull and then some. But yeah, this is a decent enough start to the franchise. I kind of like the low budget, lo-fi sort of feel for the most part. There's quite a nice slow burn feel to it, and I do quite like the way they connect the stories as we move along. So, I mean, some of the other stories, I think you obviously you get like a tutor, like who's a young girl herself, but she's tutoring like the young daughter of this family, and she starts hearing noises. They're kind of casually talking about boys and stuff, and she starts hearing noises, and then later when the girl's gone to school, she's then confronted by the house. And I should mention, of course, this franchise, as well as like the J horror that came out of Japan at this time, it's sort of symbolic for two main things. One is like the long hair, the long dark hair of like the ghosts like dripping down into the shot. The other one is, particularly with the Grudge films, is that type noise. I can't even do it. It's pretty amazing to hear, and that's what we hear in this sequence when the girl looks up into the attic because she hears sounds coming from it, and we hear that noise, and she's like dragged up into the attic, and it's a pretty creepy little moment. And we return to that house later with like further like developments. The next story, I mean, it's wrong to call them stories because they all sort of connect, but it just had that feel to it. But the next part of the film I actually like a fair bit, because we get a girl looking for a boy at school, basically, that she hasn't seen for a while. She asks his brother, and he just says, well, he must still be in school. And there's a connection, like the same family name with the teacher appears to be. But she's looking around the school for him, and she asks like someone working in like the office to look for him, or she makes an announcement anyway, asks him to come to like the office. which he doesn't do, and she's like leaves the girl alone, says, if he gets here when I'm away, wait here, sort of thing. So there's some quite creepy stuff in this part. The kind of like lights flickering in the office when the girl's waiting, and she slowly starts twigging, and there's a presence here, and I'm pretty sure it's meant to be the boy from the opening part, the boy in the house that appears in ghost form to her. But that's a pretty good sort of atmospheric sort of part of the film. The stuff in the score I quite like a fair bit. And then we move to Kenna, who's like the other girl who lives with the family in the house. And what's creepy about this scene is that the mother gets home and she can't find anyone. Now I'm assuming the tutor who was attacked earlier, she's up in the attic still. So the mother starts searching around the house, and it's kind of mysterious because someone should be home by now. And then casually Kenna comes in and she brushes past the mother and starts walking up the stairs, but you can see clearly that there's blood drenched over her, and eventually the mother either hears her or sees her, and she looks over and sees her walking up. And what's freaky is, as I said, blood is drenched on her, but she's almost walking like an entity, like a sort of a non-human being. There's just something about her walk. And the mother obviously is in shock, but she kind of soon realises, hey, this isn't my daughter, who are you? And that's the part I told you about when she turns, and she's got no chin, but she appears or no jaw, and she appears in ghost form. And it's a pretty freaky moment, even though the special effects makeup let it down a little bit. And it's at that point that we get the wrap around the story to returning to the boy in the house with the teacher. And there's all sorts of weird sort of macabre type stuff going on in this side. To be honest, some of it I couldn't quite work out. But the boy starts talking to himself in a room, or it appears as though he's talking to the parents on the phone or something, and says, Mr. whatever the tutor's name is here, he wants to talk to you. But then when the teacher walks in the room, there's no one there, basically. There's no one else there, so he thinks the boy might be talking to himself. Another point about the house, as I said, it's very run down. It's very sort of messy in an unhealthy sort of way. So I sort of thought this might have been the way of the film kind of commenting on that, the housing conditions in Japan at this time, possibly. I might have been reading too much into that, but it did sort of highlight the squalor that the boy was living in. And I guess just the isolation, the fact that he's surrounded by this mess and I guess it does make it quite an uncomfortable setting because the teacher's looking at it as well. But yeah, the teacher starts to uncover weird shit going on in the house, because at one point he stumbles into this random room, and the door's opened for him by a spirit, basically, or that's the impression anyway. And he stumbles upon this book, which obviously someone has kind of hand done sort of thing. It's got pictures in and writing, and it describes something weird happening to him because his name's Kobayashi, or the surname. And it's something about getting him drunk and just random stuff happening to him. So that freaks him out. It's almost like a prediction of the future or something. So he goes to get the boy, says it's not safe in this house, we need to go. He then gets a random phone call, and this is when stuff gets really weird, because it's this guy in a phone booth who starts talking about like the wife's unborn child, and says I think he says it's a girl, actually. I can't remember what the gender was, but and then starts laughing, and the guy, the teacher, like freaks out. But then we cut back to the phone booth with like blood going all over the place, and all sorts of random weird shit happens with the guy on the street as well. But it's almost, again, it's like, has he done something to the wife? Is this a prediction for the future? So obviously the teacher is left shocked. So there is something, I think, generally disturbing about this scene, this part of the film. And then the spirits start, you get the two ghosts like coming after them from two different sides. And there's something about like the female ghost of the girl crawling towards him, like down the stairs. It's almost like a virus sort of thing. That's the way it like came across. And maybe they show you a bit too much at this point. Maybe you lose some mystique, but it's quite effective anyway. It's quite well done. But I might have to watch this again to figure some of this stuff out. But the end part of the film, it jumps to the present day, and obviously all this has gone down, and there's hardly any survivors, but the estate agent is like desperate to sell the house, and him and his like must be his girlfriend or wife go to look around their house, and there's something with sake where the girlfriend sees like one of the spirits, and then you have this sake and it's been blessed by a spirit. So she says to the estate agency, says, you've got to get whoever buys this house, make sure they drink this sake, basically. So that's pretty random and weird, but we get kind of an end bit where he says he sold the house, but it turns out that it's still haunted. Basically, the threat is still there because she gets a shot of a ghost in like the doorway. But I think the payoff to what we have, like the end of the film, pays stuff off quite well. I think, as I said, I think there is a bit of a limitation. I think certain moments, I think maybe just feel a bit random, like random set pieces, and some of those set pieces are like better than others. But overall, it's not a bad watch. It's definitely worth ticking it off that horror list, and you can do that for free actually, because the film is on YouTube. I might even put a link in the description, but it's easy to find. It's on YouTube and you can watch it for free. It's also a short film. It's only like just over an hour. It's like an hour 10 minutes, so it's going to be quite an easy watch. So there you have it. That's JuOn the Curse, the first of the Grudge franchise from Japan. And I'll give it 6 out of 10. I think that sounds about right. So 6 out of 10 for JuOn the Curse. And look forward to me reviewing more of the franchise in the future. And look for many more horror movie watches over this month. Not just reviews, but also I will be doing some special live streams.